Good afternoon and welcome to Rundlii Gaming. So this is going to be another video about another deck that I currently have built, and I'm just going to go over some of the cards in it and why they were chosen. The first deck that we're actually going to be going over is going to be our Plinker deck. So I'll take a quick moment here. And this plays on some fairly older cards, actually. So this is probably by no means modern legal or anything like that. And I threw a few other random cards in here just to explain different other options we have. Alright, so we're going to drop to 7. Not really good starting hand, so let's go ahead and mulligan that. And take a look. Well, so pretty much what we're going to do is go over. So let's say this would be the first draw. You'll have your 7 cards and you drew 1 because it was the other person that played it first. The objective of this deck is going to be to hit the 3 mana tier because most of your creatures do, like what she does, the Volshak's Sorcerer. She can do 1 point of damage by tapping. So pretty much whenever she does a point of damage, she can do it to either a creature or another player. So let's say as an example I would drop this as my first turn. There's not much else we could do. This is not a bad starting hand, though it's not a very good one either. So at this point we'll untap, and then we'll draw. He is actually one of the only 2 drops you have on here. I know there might be newer versions of cards that do similar abilities. This is just currently how I have it built. In this particular case, we could actually bring him out, because it'd be good to at least have him on the table. He'll still have Summoning Sickness, though, so there is that slight disadvantage as well. On turn 2, it's not so bad to at least have something on the board. And then let's go and draw a card. And at this point, we could drop another mountain. This will be able to bring her out. She's pretty good because of the fact that she has haste. And at that point you'd bring that out. And these can start actually taking down their creatures pretty quickly afterward. As I said, this entire deck will be centered around that idea of this creature comes into play, he's able to tap and do a point of damage, which is basically it's kind of like the old school version of what they used to call the Plinker deck, hence the name Plinker. Basically you're going to be plinking off their creatures and then hitting them for damage afterward. Because let's say if they're playing an elf deck right now, you could probably take out, say, a Lanalar elf and then some other elf afterward. And then next turn you could do 2 points of damage to something else. So if you want to take out their Archdruid, you could just shoot them completely out. So let's go ahead and tap. So this is turn 3. You've already did 2 points of damage to something, whatever that might be. So go ahead and draw a card. Now at this point you have one of 2 main options here. You'll definitely want to drop another blue mana. I put in here the Freed from the Real as 1. Basically you could tap a mana to either tap him or untap target creature. Again, since these guys can tap to do point of damage, pretty much this ends up being for every blue mana you have, you can tap and do point of damage. So let's say as an example I were to enchant this on him. I could tap to do a point of damage, tap a blue mana to untap him, and then tap him for another point of damage. Another thing I put in here are the Sigils of Sleep, which are actually really awesome as well. Whenever a enchanted creature deals damage to a player, return target creature that player controls to its owner's hand. This is another very powerful one. If you combine that with the Freed from the Real, you're essentially going to completely stop their side of the board. One weakness this deck usually runs into is the fact that if they drop, say, a 6/6 creature, it takes a lot of plinking to kill that creature. However, with the Sigil of Sleep, I can just tap, do a point of damage to the player, and then in turn return that creature to his owner's hand. Or in response to them attacking, I tap, do a point of damage, return to their hand. So those are a couple different options here. And now we're just going to go through some further cards in the deck. Just explain some other ones. Penman's Aura is just simply another version of Freed from the Real. Penman's Aura, though, is not modern legal, though Pretty much the entire deck's not really modern legal. But this one does add a few additional things. Since you mostly use these for the untap ability, Freed from the Real allows you to tap or untap. But since I'll never actually tap my own creatures with it, Penman's Aura is usually better. But basically I can pay a blue mana to untap enchanted creature. I can give it flying, which I don't really need. Or I can give it Shroud. And Shroud's usually really good as well. So like if I drop this on this creature, they try to lightning bolt it. In response, I Shroud it. Let's draw through a few more here. These are also really good. Gorgon Flail is another way to kind of push the idea that when my creatures tap for damage, they will do the max possible, stuff that they can. In this particular case, it'll give them Death Touch. So pretty much whenever one of my creatures deal damage to their creature, it just kills them. So that 6/6 we mentioned earlier, if he were to try to attack, I could tap to do 1 point of damage to it, which in turn would kill it. So let's draw a few more here. And there's a few different things that you can also consider as well. Shock is not, Shock or Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt apparently would be a lot better. But Shock is not a bad version to go with either. Let's say as an example, if you only have one of those guys sitting out on turn 3, then when you do the tap to deal point of damage, you could Shock if it's like a 3 toughness or a 2 toughness, and you're not able to kill it at that particular time. If you have a Lightning Bolt, you can go up to 4, so obviously Lightning Bolts would definitely be better. I currently run Shocks in mine just because I don't feel like getting Lightning Bolts, and most of the time, Shock usually does just fine as well. Otherwise, we have Arm with the Ether. This is another card that is kind of being tested out. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent. You may return target creature that player controls to its owner's hand. Again, it's kind of like Sigil of Sleep, but for all your creatures. But unfortunately, it's only going to be 1 turn. So this doesn't have as much reusability. Though, if you were not getting any sigils, dropping this might be beneficial as well. Let's see if we can discard our hand. And Flame is actually something I use in there as well. Though it's kind of hit miss. I won't say it's a great card, but it's not a bad one either. Deals 2 damage to each creature dealt damage this turn. So basically I can go through, let's say his entire side of the board was like 3/3 Beast. I can go through the entire side of a board, do 1 point of damage to each of them, and then for every creature that was dealt damage already, this turn is going to take an additional 2, so pretty much 3 all the way across the board for every one that I actually damage. Or I could do a couple extras. Seal of Fire is pretty much just a shock, but it's an enchantment that you sacrifice, so what I can do is I can drop this early game. Usually turn 1, turn 2, you don't have much going on anyway. Drop a Seal of Fire, and then just let it sit there until I need it. And then usually in response to something I can shock it, or I might use it as that extra 2 points of damage I need to kill something. Let's see here. Well, just look at the library itself. Otherwise, yeah, as I said, most of the other cards are going to pretty much do all the same thing. Like in this case, you have Zuran's Spellcaster. He taps, does a point of damage. The old Prodigal Sorcerer. He taps, does 1 point of damage. These are all at the 3 mana marker. So it tends to be a little bit slower than... So it's kind of a slower deck, though. But once it starts going, it can be very, very, very annoying. It's kind of similar to like the Royal Assassin type decks. The ones that might make you tap and then the Royal Assassin would kill you. It's pretty much strictly about creature control until you can get your win condition. However, this deck doesn't actually have much of a win condition. The main goal is to constantly control your creatures, then gradually tap you out for damage. So, though it may take a while, it can be still quite effective, especially if I'm dropping, especially if I have 7 or 8 of these creatures out, and they're constantly doing damage to all your creatures there. Let's see. And then normally, if you looked at the start of the video here, you'll notice I'm running 10 islands and 10 mountains. Normally, though, I would usually stick with 8 mountains and then 12 islands. So that's probably one small change I would make to this particular set of how I have it built right now. I just kind of built it just a little bit ago. So the reason for this, and it does come with a slight disadvantage as well, is that the Volshak Sorcerer, the Sorceress, the one that has the haste right here, she is a double red. However, she would be the only person that may cause you trouble if you were to change your mana base that way. Because pretty much with the rest of the deck, you pretty much only need 1 blue or 1 red to actually cast your spell. And the main purpose for actually switching the mana base that way would be the fact that since most of your deck is actually reliant on things like your Freed from the Real, which is the one that allows you to untap, or the Pemanzara, you're going to want to use as much blue mana as possible in order to keep untapping your creatures and hitting them for more damage. Essentially, you're turning all your creatures into machine guns, the ones that actually carry those enchantments on them. And as far as this deck goes, as I said, it's fairly slow. You pretty much won't be able to do a whole lot until about turn 3 or 4. Usually by turn 3 or 4, that's when you will start to actually start removing a lot of creatures. So if you're not playing another fast deck, or if you're not playing against a fast deck, then this one's not bad. It is kind of different, and it's kind of neat to play with. But if you're playing a really quick deck that's going to aggro through you, this one's probably going to be destroyed unless it can actually get to, say, Volshak on turn 3 or a Hunter on turn 2. And then if they have any sort of creature control, they'll probably just get rid of them anyway. And then your entire thing will fall apart pretty quickly afterward. So as I said, it's not a bad deck, but it also depends kind of what you're facing against. If they're running a bunch of Eldrazi, with the exception of Emrakul, or anything that's indestructible, which I think a few of them are, again, you can either use the Sigils of Sleet to bounce it to their hand, or you can go through and actually kill if you have the Gorgon Flail up there. So, as I said, it's just another concept of a deck. So I do hope you will enjoyed watching Rundlii Gaming. I will be making another video pretty soon as well. Probably going over my bird deck next. So, thank you for watching Rundlii Gaming, and you have a good day.